Place 33, Secrets of Universal Truths Revealed by Sherilyn Bridget Avalon. Chapter 1, The Beginning. Let's peer in on a session Sherilyn is having with her hypnotherapist. She is distraught because her belief system has been compromised. While under the influence of hypnosis, she tells the truth. How did it all start? The counselor asked her. Let's start from the beginning, she says. Okay, Sherilyn replied. I always had an adventurous spirit. I read the book There Is a River by Thomas Segrup. The book was about Edgar Cayce, who was an American psychic. During the turn of the century, he possessed the ability to answer questions on subjects such as healing and wars, as well as experience visions of the world ending. He was a seer, and he would go into a hypnotic trance and heal others while seeing their spirit. It was at that point in time she realized that's what she wanted to do. She had no idea what it meant. After being raised a devout Catholic Christian, it opened her eyes to the possibilities of the other side of the veil. Growing anxious about sharing her story, Sherilyn said, Okay. Look, when I first started coming here to these counseling sessions, it was just to humor my mother. Now I don't know if things are up or down, if this is real or not real. It all started when my biological father entered a contest. An eccentric old man offered to give him a prize of $1 million to the person who could prove the existence of the soul. Dad got an honorable mention in that contest and was chosen as one of the people who had proof of a soul, in a way. His proof came from books. He said when an author writes something and you read it back, it brings the soul of the individual who wrote the book present. That is, as long as the thought remains alive, then the soul remains alive. The hypnotherapist found that a fascinating way to explain the existence of a soul. However, that's only one dimension of the riddle, Sherilyn concluded. He also believed there was no such thing as an afterlife. Can you imagine? You're just dead and in the darkness for eternity? That's it? Sherilyn wiggled in her seat while relaying this thought because it bothered her so much. Sherilyn's biological father left when she was very young, 2 years old. She didn't have the opportunity to know him till later in life. Mother remarried, and she then had a stepfather around the age of 5. He's a good man, Sherilyn said. He just didn't know how to handle children. He did the best he could at the time, I suppose. He did teach me to be entrepreneurial and always do my best, she states enthusiastically. But her grandfather was always there for her as a child. She and her grandpa were generally close. She loved him so much, then she remembered. He always came to visit us on Wednesdays. He always brought pie and ice cream. Mom would cook a delicious homemade dinner, she recalled, which he always enjoyed because he was divorced and he didn't cook much. She also remembers running outdoors with her 2 brothers, knowing sunrise was about the time when he would show up. So they raced over to Grandpa's car to see who would get there fastest, who would get the ice cream first. When Sherilyn was 15 years old, Grandpa took her on a trip to Lake Tahoe. He liked joking about how his brand new sports car, a 1974 Chevrolet Camaro, was a chick magnet. With a wink, he would chuckle about how she would deter all the women who might be attracted to him in his sporty ride. They stayed with her cousins in their cabin at the lake. Sherilyn was so excited and happy to see them because they had always had so much fun every time they got together. This time was no exception. One night, her and Grandpa visited the lounge at Harvey's. She should have been 21 to get into the lounge, but back then they were more lenient with the rules. She remembers feeling uncomfortable and nervous about sitting in the lounge, even with Grandpa. So they sat way in the back, in a corner booth. Frankie Femanale was in his final act when the bartender handed Grandpa a note, which she still has. It read, "Don't bite your fingernails, it's a dead giveaway." She stopped biting her nails and sipped on a soda quietly. Being so embarrassed, nothing was said about it again. She just enjoyed hanging out with him no matter where they went. Country legend Johnny Cash was playing in Lake Tahoe that weekend. She didn't get to see him, but she saw Bob Hope and the comedian Lulu. Sean Connery was there. Grandpa was so pleased he managed to get his autograph. Her cousins saw Elvis and Liberace. It was the best trip ever, a once-in-a-lifetime vacation. Then it was time to turn around and drive home. That's when she thought she might give Grandpa a heart attack on the way home from the trip, because he let her drive for the first 100 miles on the highway. She was practicing driving to get a learner's permit soon. On the first stretch of the trip, the roads were curvy and winding. She received little instructions on what to do when a semi-truck heads straight for your car. So she swerved a little to the right, almost to the edge of the cliff in the Nevada mountains. Her heart felt like it was pumping 70 beats per second. With the help of her grandpa's strong arm on the steering wheel, he pulled her back into the lane. Then he had her pull over so he could pop one of his nitroglycerin pills. That was the first time she realized he took any kind of medication. He calmly said he would drive now. They finally made it home to Arizona in 7 hours safely. 2 years later, Mom, who was pregnant after 16 years of trying, had a scare before finally coming home from the hospital with her new baby boy. Well, what happened was, Sherilyn's little brother, Mike, was born face first. It was early in the morning, November 9th, 1974, and Sherilyn called Grandpa to invite him over for breakfast. She had finally got a hold of him. I guess he was in the shower. She said, "Grandpa, you've got to come over and see Mom's new baby. He's adorable, except for the bruises on his face." The bruises were from the forceps during the birth. She always said, "Mike just wanted to see where he was going before he got here." A little family humor. She was playing pool with her brother Walt. An hour passed by, then 2 hours, and finally 3 hours passed. Grandpa never missed a chance to come over. To our house, she thought. That was not like him at all. She was growing worried. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was her uncle calling to tell us Grandpa was found dead, wrapped in a towel after getting out of the shower. He was lying halfway off his bed with his nitroglycerin pill bottle still in his hand. He could not get the childproof cap off to pop one of his pills. Grandpa transcended that day. He had a weak heart. The doctor said it may have been caused from having rheumatic fever as a child. She remembered crying and crying. That was her first experience with death. Her wonderful grandpa was gone. She knew she would never see him again. Grandpa would miss all the things they talked about, her first love, getting married, and having babies. She wanted him to be there for all of it. "He and I were tight," she exclaimed, while crying hysterically. She was his only granddaughter, and he always treated her like a princess. Obviously, she felt certain she would never see or hear from him again. Not so. Years later, she met a man in Sedona, Arizona, whose name was Jananda. After that encounter, she grew more fascinated with discovering more about the other side, as many call it. The counselor said, during her search, she found an article in the National Enquirer dated July 2nd, 1991, about a top surgeon, Dr. Sodaro, chief surgeon at Rome's main public hospital. The headline read, "I have no doubt our life does not end with death. I have scientific evidence to prove it." According to his research, Dr. Antonio Aldo Sodaro, 40% of people who reach the threshold of death undergo a near-death experience, also known as NDE, in which they leave their bodies during a medical crisis. The article went on to say the surgeon professor had hypnotized 30 of his patients and found unbelievable proof of life after death. Hypnosis excludes the possibility that the recollections may be made up, he said. He also discovered people pass through 4 distinct phases. First, a sense of calmness when they realize they are dead and they have left their body. While floating outside their bodies, they are drawn toward a heavenly light. Many resist the pull of light, and finally they return to stay on earth. Sherilyn calls it departed entering another dimension, or what we commonly call dead. Another man mentioned in the article that they talked about seeing his grandpa, Joe, during his near-death experience. Dr. Sodaro said a young man was killed in a car crash. He observed his lifeless body, and in the twisted wreck of the car, he did not understand the desperation of the people around him. He felt totally calm and relaxed. Then he felt attracted to a warm, benevolent light, and he started going towards it. On his way to the light, he met his grandfather, who was with a woman he did not know. They told him, "It's not your time. It's not time for you to come here yet. Go back. Go back to your life. They are waiting for you." The young man wanted to carry on to the light, but they persuaded him to abandon himself to the force pulling him back toward the earth. When he was resuscitated, he described the encounter with his deceased grandpa Joe and the woman. Residents from where he lived came out of their homes and gathered at the scene of the accident. One neighbor recognized his description of the woman as a neighbor who lived nearby. When they went to her house to tell her of the extraordinary encounter, they found the woman lying in her bed, dead. Again, departed, entering another dimension. Another patient of Dr. Sodaro's went into cardiac arrest while having a pacemaker implanted. He told the paramedics later, while he watched us desperately trying to resuscitate him on the operating table, he was frantically trying to tell us to leave him alone, Dr. Sodaro recalled. When he finally succeeded in bringing him back to life, his first words were, "What the hell did you do that for? You snatched me away from paradise." Well, everyone is happy when they go through a near-death experience and return, except those who attempt to commit suicide. Now, Dr. Sodaro said they have a strong anxiety and deep sadness, but when they are brought back, they generally have much more positive attitude about life and never try to commit suicide again. Dr. Sodaro also wrote, all near-death experience subjects improve their spiritual and social lives, become more generous, optimistic, and more positive. They know this life is just a relatively brief experience that leads to a better existence. Next, Sherilyn turned to a book titled The Quantum Mechanical Body, authored by Deepak Chopra, who wrote, "The universe is the physical body of cosmic consciousness, and the laws of nature are its mind." Some scientists compromise because their instincts or desires prompt them to hope that life goes on. They point to research being conducted with men and women who have survived near-death experiences. They also recount the testimonies of medical personnel who have observed individuals undergoing deathbed visions. While many scientists argue the answers that come from people who have experienced a near-death experience are subjective, other researchers insist such reports provide valuable clues to the dimensions of reality that lie beyond our physical death. The counselor states, "Many believe the level you go to depends on what level of unity consciousness one is resonating within. The levels move up and down simultaneously and as we awaken more within universal consciousness." Sherilyn believes there is a veil leading to the other side, which we can cross over through the aid of hypnosis. "I have arrived at the conclusion that right after you die, the real you is fully present. Where? Some call it heaven, or Sheol, or maybe even purgatory," Sherilyn dictates. The counselor comes back with, "There is no scientific evidence that we go to heaven after we die. There is no evidence except for those people who have had a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience. The Bible, along with other spiritual books written about crossing over, the great beyond, the veil of the ego personality into higher dimensions, provides insight into this phenomenon. But that's it. What about the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg, an 18th century scientist, inventor, and mystic who did out-of-body travel, which allowed him to visit the afterlife realms?" Sherilyn believed this was possible. The counselor said, "Through hypnosis, she discovered there are 33 dimensions. She learned that she could actually guide a willing subject through these dimensions, similar to the experience of author Edgar Cayce." So the counselor hypnotized Sherilyn, and she went on this journey into the unknown, where she finds there is a conscious afterlife. What seems to be the most important thing is seeking a higher level of connection with God and Source and its oneness. It is like having a near-death experience through the use of hypnosis. Here is the beginning of my story about the other side of the veil, with the help of Sterling, Angie, Frank, Joseph, and Kenton, that will enlighten you to the other dimensions of the universe. Sherilyn explains to the counselor, "The Elevator of Enlightenment is a technique used in hypnosis, but it is also real on the other side of the veil, in the divine mind. Jesus said that the kingdom of God was within." The counselor said, "Close your eyes and enjoy the ride."